Not at all. It's in our board packets.
There's no sound on it.
I got it.
Oh, never mind.
Thanks.
Thanks,
So-
Robbie.
Do over.
Technical error.
Okay, so we'll back up a little bit. I understand the sound was not working. We were just introducing the topic of discussion today. I was telling the commissioners that our goal today is really just to set the stage for the budget discussions. What we're going to be doing today is reviewing some overviews of our current financial position and talk about some of the things that are changing the revenue picture for us leading into 2025. We also want to get feedback from the commissioners today on kind of what their budget priorities are before we get into a list of some of the proposed expenditures for next year. And so this is really just the beginning of the budget discussion, and to the extent that commissioners have questions today that we can't answer immediately, there will be another budget work session Tuesday next week on the 16th. That will be at the regular committee of the whole meeting time, which is 10:30. And if we can't answer those questions today, then we'll make sure we have answers for the next meeting on Tuesday.
Thank you. I was going to suggest that we might ask Brady to sit close to a microphone, because I imagine he's going to be speaking quite a bit today.
Yeah, and we'll move that back.
So we can kind of move that back and forth. All right.
And so before Brady starts, are there any kind of questions or overriding comments that you'd like to put on the table in terms of process or things that you guys are looking for from the discussion today?
Commissioner Mills.
Well, I would very much like to look at, of course, where we stand, but also where we're looking to go. And I appreciate the tax capacity aspect of things and the tax rate aspect of things, and where everything could just mesh up. So hopefully we'll be able to get to some kind of impactful summary there at the end.
I guess I would like to know, what is our budget? How much money do we have in the accounts I sent to Brady in the lockbox in a little corner somewhere in his office? What is the total amount of our budget money? So you have that, I'm sure, on this papers.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Anything else, Commissioner Johnson?
I guess I'll save my questions for as we go along.
All right. Thank you.
Did you want to start with the general fund or with the highway since they're here? I wanted to ask that first.
We can do it either way. I thought we would start by just doing the overview of our financial position and some of the information that we've put together in the packet.
Okay, so just probably in order of, I think, how they came out in the packet, we put together the general fund budget review the last quarter of 2023, because we hadn't done that previously, just to kind of back up to see where things ended in 2023 in the general fund.
Question already.
Yeah,
When is the fourth quarter going to be done?
this is the fourth quarter.
It says it says this is a final year.
2023.
2023.
Okay,
Yeah, so we're backing up to the end of 2023.
okay. Just want to make sure we're on the
'Cause,
same
yeah,
page.
so we hadn't done that. So if you go to that last page, you see everything should be 100% in a perfect world. Our revenues were at 150%, our expenses at 97%, which is very typical. And so the net levy on this cash, it's a modified accrual, but it still doesn't have all the adjustments that an audit will make. So this will be changed dramatically in the audit, especially for interest revenue, because of the way that is technically calculated. So highlighted are some of the large items, discrepancies between budget and actual. In the auditor treasurers, the revenue is higher than budgeted because we made that change of the 5% lodging tax after the budget had been set. The next really large item that I wanted you to see was the interest revenue. That's Department 41, the fourth item down. Look on the left-hand side, $1,794,901. That's mostly, there's a little bit of other revenue, but that's mostly interest revenue. That's what we were actually taking in 2023 because of those high interest rates.
Let's keep doing that.
Yeah, well, it's happening in 2024 so far. We've been expecting those rates to be lower, and this is the first time we've kind of heard that in the news, just in the last couple of days, that we might expect that finally, but it's gone a year longer than I expected it to. So you won't see that number in our audit because it gets adjusted to this end of the year. It's just a requirement that it says, what if you had to sell all your investments on December 31st at 12:59 PM? What would the value be on that date? So it'll drop dramatically based on that, but this is the cash that came in. I don't think I'm going to go through, I really wanted you to see that, but I don't think I'm going to go through any of the other items unless you wish to see those, because this is history. We could do it at another meeting or something, but if you do have questions.
No, it just makes it can make things confusing when our revenues are way higher than we expected, or way lower, or, it just,
Yeah.
it makes it difficult to really plan, right? So I
Yeah.
appreciate this update. I don't know if it helps me yet.
Well,
No.
what helps me is on the back side where all the explanation is in red, for example, line item 394, planning and zoning, vacation rental permit fees are twice what was budgeted. So that's really helpful to me in explaining why that number is so different.
Yeah, I'm sorry, the explanations help. It's just forecasting is where I'm.
It is, and basically, we didn't try to forecast the interest revenues again. The budget, I think, increased the budget to 400, I don't recall, 400 or 450, just because I don't trust that interest revenue is going to be consistent. And the worst case is we just have a better fund balance. But you all know that it's there. You'll see our cash balances, et cetera. And if we need to budget more, we can. It certainly is clear, we're bringing in large amounts of cash this year again, so, at least for the first half.
Any other questions for Brady about the modified accrual basis?
And this is certainly, again, this is going to be an ongoing conversation into Tuesday next week and at subsequent business meetings. So if there are questions
Yeah.
that come up regarding this at a later point, we can certainly talk about this.
All right, thank you.
So I think the second item is then our overall summary of the costs that we've seen, all the requests from departments. And you see a COLA, a cost of living. We had to use a number. We don't have a number. We don't have a contract that's settled. Those are just being worked on now. So this is just something that's probably, kind of mid-range, maybe a little high compared to what's out there in the general cost of living over the last year or so. But probably close enough for preliminary budgeting. And so all of that is in this budget, that cost of living, all of the things that everyone has requested, all of those items that you saw on that list, the 607,000, they're all in the budget so that we're not, trying to, oh, yeah, we got to remember that, So they're in here. And then down at the bottom, and this was really Commissioner Johnson's request that we back up without those and then decide whether to add them in. So at the very bottom, you'll see all the expenses, 45 million of expenses, the revenues, use of fund balance, and you'll hear more from Lisa and Robbie. So they actually budgeted, you see that negative 115,534. So they budgeted to put back a little more into their fund balance because it wasn't very high. So that's how they budgeted. So, you'll ask them more about that later. But so down at the bottom here, here's the number that was first presented to you. There may be there are other, for sure, smaller items that departments have requested that are different from last year, but these are the large items that you saw in the at the board agenda, $607,958. So we're just saying, okay, we're going to take that out of there and not go line item by department, just so that you see the overall. So just take that 607 out of there. Then there's the next item down is match the use of fund balance that we had in 2024. I can show you it here, but when you add the $1,227,299, if everybody sees that, and then look down below at the line below that at $1,678,410, that's the fund. That was our final use of fund balance in 2024. So if you add that in, now we're using the same amount. This was the starting place. This was Stacy's request that we go, okay, let's not add those 607 in yet. Let's make our use of fund balance the same as last year, so we have something to compare to. And the other request was to add the remaining of that local, what is it? Tribal consistency funds. Those are the federal funds that we got the large amount. This is the second batch, the $2 million. We've given $700,000 to HRA, and we used a lot of it in our budget last year and so forth. This is what's left, $853,519 that could be used for the HRA or anything, literally, or as a revenue to reduce our levy. And so here it's listed, it's under the revenue column, so it's a revenue. So we're just adding it in as a revenue to everything else we already have in the budget. And the last item requires some explanation. The HRA is not included up in the line items for the county levy. It was last year and the year before. Our audit team, during last year's work, actually made the decision, it's taken them a while to come up with that decision, is that they are the same category as the EDA and are a component unit. And you'll see in our audit, the 2022 audit, they are listed as a component unit, and they're a separate column, the same as the EDA in our audit. So literally, they're going to show up in our tax statement down there under special taxing districts, along with the EDA and the hospital and ARDC. So you'll see a really major jump in that line item. So they're not part of our budget and levy any longer. But for this comparison, then I'm just adding them back in because of their last year. And if we're comparing to 24, so here they're in addition to the expenses. And it's the same number that you see down below the line, EDA budget, HRA budget. So just showing them for purposes of working through our budget scenario, to add that back in so it's comparable. So with all that said, with the additional $853,000, the additional use of fund balance, besides what was requested to be used by Public Health Human Services, then our levy is starting at $11,359,210, which is slightly $800,000 less than last year's final levy. And if we did nothing more than what's on here, all these adjustments, we would have a reduction in levy without any of those $607,000 of increase, and using all of the local area, tribal, federal funds, and using another $1.2 million of fund balance. That's where we'd be.
Can you remind me about the local area tribal funds and what we had said that was going to be used for?
The only thing that everything that we had described on this one we've already used or allocated it. And this was not allocated to anything directly. The other one, the first one got completely allocated. That was the first million. That was the SLFR, state and local, I forget all the terminology, but
So we did
we,
allocate one.
we-
and now we
yeah.
have another one.
This is,
You know, I was
the
thinking-
2 point something.
Yes.
A little over $2 million.
this is the one Ann discovered at the end of the year and
We
said,
got it unexpectedly.
did anybody know we were going to get this? And we just found out,
Mhm.
as did a lot, because we have a tribal government in our county. So it
Correct.
wasn't everybody that got this one. It was just those that were a
Right.
tribal government got the additional money. And so this one, they treat different than the first one. We don't have to do any we don't have to do any reporting on this one. And we have this up to 10 million. We can use it just as we would our levy or any other general funds that we get. So we can use it for HRA, we can use it to offset our own levy, we could use it for, specific projects, anything that we legally are allowed to do, we can spend this money on, so.
My memory of the money, and we talked about this at the board level, but I remember hearing a lot of concerns from James about the, just how are we gonna pay for the comp study, right? And I saw this as a potential off-ramp from using our funds to pay for the comp
Mhm.
study, because we knew it was coming, it's just weaning ourselves off of the use of fund balance was kind of how to make it less painful for taxpayers.
And-
That's right. And
Right.
we proposed a 2-year glide path,
Right.
basically,
Yeah.
to subsidize those increases until they were fully absorbed into the levy.
Mhm. But that it wasn't like we were doing it, that was just kind of an idea.
Yeah, and we used, both the highway department used about 166,000 something last year, and we used some, 200 and some at the end of the year. And, yeah.
But the use of fund balance, like for PHHS, you've got $566,000.
That's what they put in their proposal.
Do we know do we have information about that?
We do, actually. There's
Yeah.
a sheet that Brady's going to cover that
Okay.
shows our, that is the that page. Right, doesn't it have the fund balances by, the balances by in the trial balance report?
Yeah, they have that, I mean, it's all laid out in their full budget. You'll see that when they propose it, so.
We don't have their
It's
information
not part of
today.
today's information.
No.
Their budget presentation is scheduled for August 6th. And part of the reason for that is because they're still awaiting information from the state on revenue amounts.
Right, waiting for grants is what I understand.
So I think that's going to take a little longer to get.
So, am I looking at the right thing then with public health here at their 788,000?
Yeah, so-
Fund balance?
This is just a report of what's in the unreserved fund balance. It's not total fund balance, but
Right, yeah.
just the unreserved portion. So, and as you can see, if we move on to that, is the next item, the trial balance report. So you can see the general fund has 9,182,000. This is not an audited unreserved fund balance, but this is what we currently see in the system. It'll change after the audit. And then this page 3 shows Road and Bridge unreserved fund balance this is at the end of the year, 2,349,428.95.
Yep.
And not unexpected. They budgeted to use some fund balance, and they did. Well, their number will change a little bit too with the audit. There are always other adjustments.
And if I may add a comment, in '24, we're budgeted to use about 1.4 million of our fund balance for our heated storage facility match required by state aid. So that will go down significantly during this fiscal year.
Which goes to why they're budgeting to add a little bit back.
Mhm.
And the next page 4 and page 5 and ending on page 6 is all social services fund. This is the way they account a little bit differently up there. The reason they have so many line items is each of their major departments has its own cash balance sheet items. In the general fund, none of our other departments have their own balance sheet items, but for reasons of their grants, their federal and state grants, this works best for them. So you'll see numbers for 410 public health having a $788,000 fund balance. You'll see 420, their Department for Economic Assistance, having an $89,769 fund balance. And then you'll see their social services, their major fund, Department 430, having $3,567,858 as their unreserved fund balance. And then you see their final on page 6, total of $4,450,464 as their fund balance. And they're projecting to use fund balance again. What's in the policy is that they shoot for 40% of their operational expenses, and this still exceeds their 40%. So they still have a solid fund balance, even with the projected use, last year and this year. Page 7 then is the building fund, and this is, again, it's what's considered unreserved fund balance, $832,409, and the building fund also has some committed funds, because we still have some funds committed towards, now essentially it's for the recycling center equipment fund. So that's a committed fund. That's not in this. That's another 300 and some thousand. This is just the unreserved. And then at the end there, you've got the airport, and that is still a negative fund balance, 494,000, and that just reflects that federal money that we did not receive because of an error made by our engineering master contract back in 2011. So we're going to mediation with them in September over
Right,
this.
September 5th.
Yeah, so. Well, the cost of money goes down as the years go on, so there is.
For them, it's a good deal to delay.
Yes,
but
that's
for
the
us,
reason
it's-
there's such long delays and things like this, because, yeah. So we have other reports, if you want to see cash balances, but this is just unreserved. Our audit team is coming up next week, working on our 2023 fund balance. And sometime before this year, I'm quite confident we'll have our financial statements before we do our proposed levy. And I'll have the solid fund balance numbers before then.
So do you anticipate, Brady, that we'd get those like in early September or late August, or?
It's hard to predict. Now we've got, the two other entities, HRA and EDA. I think it's going to be, fast, and I think it should happen then. We were late, very late on our audit last year because the EDA wasn't
Mhm.
prepared, but I think they are this year. I think they got their financial, house in better order this year, so they'll be able to get the audit done quickly, because that's part of our audit, and they can't finish it until they finish the EDA.
Right.
And now the HRA is now having their accounting done outside too, but everything I've heard, I think they're pretty solid too, so I don't expect any delays on either of those. But you never know for sure.
Thank you. So then the next thing we want to take a look at is comparing the adopted 2024 budget to the proposed 2025.
And this sheet is really to look at the tax rate. Assessor Thompson gave us his preliminary numbers, and if you look down in the orange highlight at the bottom of that sheet, is everybody looking there? You'll see the tax capacity. In 2024, it was $27,255,000, and the preliminary numbers for this year for taxes 2025 is $31,817,000, so another double-digit increase. We've had like 12.5% increases the last 2 years, and now we've got about a 16.7% increase. So I don't have the breakdown and how much of that is, dollar, how much of that is new construction.
Mm-hmm.
As in most of these years, most of this is just inflated values based on what the sales prices are. So then it's a matter as a taxpayer of, did you have a large increase? Is it larger than the average? Is it larger or lesser than the average? Really tells you how you're doing and compared to everybody else, and how hard the levy increase is going to hit you.
He said the other night it was 1%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
About one, so, that's, 300,000 roughly of this, of the net tax capacity,
Mhm.
so. Which is nothing to, nothing to sneeze at, but it's not, a huge part of that increase. It's a small part of that increase is new. And what that does is it reduces our tax rate again. So you see last year's tax rate 44.43%, and our tax rate looks like it'll drop again a couple more points to about 42. And this is just the county tax rate,
Mhm.
42.46%. More information on this, we put together some, how does it hit homestead? Because that new law is going into effect next year, where the market value exclusion, for the first time, they made a change in it in over
Yeah.
20 years. So it actually, it peaks, it's a higher exclusion, 40-something, instead of no, it's just 30-something yet, but it was 30,400, and now it jumps to, I forget exactly what that number is, I'll have that for you Tuesday, but, and that peak is at 95,000, and not at 76, and then it goes down. And you don't run out of market value exclusion until somewhere over $500,000 value, so it's really just staying even, probably where it was just a few years ago, when it would disappear at 411,000, but now those values have gone up. I mean, they should be adjusting this realistically every couple of years.
Every year.
or every
Yeah.
year, yeah. If they wanted it to have the same meaning that it did when it was put into place,
Right?
you'd adjust it very often, every year. But we're glad they did something. And then the last thing we put together was just some information on our federal payment in lieu of taxes. So everybody see that page? And we've talked about that initially for 10 years. Our federal payment was to be $2,025,000, and we did get that for 3 or 4 years. And then the Great Recession, well, it already hit, but then they calculated that, we can't give you that much. So they sequestered lots of federal funds, and this was one of them. So we actually were receiving significantly less than the $2 million. So I just took a snapshot from 2019 and said, how much were we actually receiving? At that time, it was $1,891,350, and that's what we budgeted. And then that year, we found out, we got reappraised. We got reappraised at about 33% less than the $2 million. And they said, and by the way, we're going to keep paying you the, not $2 million, but the $1.8 million. But you better put some of that aside, because if the reappraisal sticks, we're going to ask you to send that money back. So from that point on, we were budgeting less in our budget. So this is the year by year that we budgeted of that BWCA. Ty Blatnick was $1,273,000 for 2020, 2021. And then we had discussions, and from those discussions, I upped it a little bit, thinking, they're not going to cut that much. So then we budgeted $1,316,000 for 3 years, and now this year, we got word that, no, we're not going to make you pay back those funds, but we're going to give you your review of the reappraisal came back with a different number. And this is what is my estimate of what they're still going to sequester funds. So it came back with $1.7 million, but with the sequester, we're budgeted for 2025 $1,630,000. So instead of $2,025,000, we were at $1,891,000, and then we're just $1,909,000. It changes a little bit each year. They don't tell us the formula. And so this was the final reappraisal sequestered by the same percentage we're being sequestered right now. So that's that number. So anyway, it's still 300,000 more, 315 more than we budgeted last year for that. That's significant. Then we have the other PILT. This is the regular PILT. This is the PILT that existed before the BWCA, and that all federal lands in the country under the same formula. And that one, you see, we took a huge jump in 2020. That came out of nowhere. So we actually got it in 2019. We budgeted the regular amount, and we got $700,000. And then we started budgeting that, and it bounced around a little bit, but roughly it's been in that $600,000 to $700,000 each year. And going up a little more the last 2 years. So way over on the right, you see that last year, the total of these federal payments, we budgeted $2,050,000. Now we're budgeting $2,368,000. So we have $318,000 more of federal payments going against our levy, and it's in the numbers you saw on our summary sheet. Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Not as awesome as I think it should be,
Yeah.
but
Better than it could
Better
have
than it
been.
was.
There
Yeah.
was a lot of hours and a lot of hand wringing and a lot of days put into that.
Yeah.
It really was.
And thanks to Bob Thompson for
Oh,
all
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
He's really on point to
Yeah.
help us out with that.
it still is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then
They're
we'll see
all-
what happens in a few years when we get reappraised again.
And they're And in his budget, there's a line item, as there would be in all three counties in the BWCA, is that putting money aside to do our own reappraisal.
Yeah.
So we've got it right then, when they do theirs, we can present ours. And,
I just got an email from Bob today that it looks like the cost of doing our own appraisal may be significantly higher than we thought it was going to be, but I haven't had a chance to discuss that with him yet. So.
All right.
Could we go back to this one?
yeah.
All right, so we're going back to the trial balance.
Numbers in front of me, but
Well, and that's why,
Yeah.
that's why we're doing
Page
this
2.
today. This
Yep.
is really just the start of the discussion.
I was talking about the fund balance unreserved in the revenue account. We started at 9.4 and we used 259 left. So right now, it's 9.1 million in that account.
Well, that was at 8:52.
Yeah.
Hey,
That was
yeah.
at 8:52.
I just want to make sure I understand what we're talking, and what do we have? So it says this month, we used 259,000 of it.
I didn't look that up. That's just got to be, that's revenues, expenses running through the system. Unreserved fund balance, if things are, all of your bills that you pay, all of the revenue that comes in, everything that happens during the month, if it isn't changed by some journal entry, the default is to go into that unreserved fund balance. So that's just a net of what happened that month that hasn't been adjusted to anywhere else. And,
All right, that makes
yeah,
it, so it's like my checking balance after
yeah,
I've.
and that was, yeah, that would have
It
been,
doesn't necessarily mean that that's how much money I have.
no.
Okay, that's,
Uh-uh.
I want to make sure I'm
Not at all.
thinking correctly here.
Yeah, so, yeah, maybe hang on to this, and when we get our audit, we'll see what that actual unreserved fund balance is in the audit. We should see that in the next couple of months. So,
And that's the one we have a policy of, that we have to keep a
Yes.
certain amount, and that's 64?
Well, it's all three funds we have policy for.
Right.
Yeah,
But I thought it was a
Three.
different amount for the general fund
It
versus the.
was,
There's-
it's like 70 or 75.
75 is the,
75.
is the goal for the general fund, and what we said was, we won't go below that. We can go below it temporarily, but only if we have a plan. Say, we're taking it right now, but we'll put that back next year or 2 years from now when something happens and we're able, there's a plan in place to return it. So,
Well, I'm just, we're going to be
Yeah.
talking buildings and
Yep.
construction. I just want to make sure I'm clear of what do we have and what
yeah.
is available.
Well, and we are working, again, we've had recent conversations with Bruce Kimmel to update the financial management plan with this new information. The last version of that document you saw did not have the update to the federal bill, for example.
Mhm.
So all of that needs to be included in the update of that plan.
Anything else regarding the current financial position?
I guess to sum it up, I mean, there's a lot to be happy about in this picture. I mean, the resolution of our Atlantic payments, the interest income, those are huge bright spots in the revenue picture.
And LATCF as well.
Mhm. All right, well, we can move on to our next item, which is our Highway Department preliminary requests.
And I just want to say, when I told Robbie and Lisa that we were having this work session, like, what do we need to prepare? And I told them, you don't really need to prepare anything, because they've already done the preliminary budget. And basically, the goal here today is really just to have a conversation about how they're seeing it and some of the things that the board should be aware of. So you guys can come up.
I'm going to move the microphone here between the two of them so they can be clearly heard.
Let's see, does everybody have the handouts? Yes?
We do. Thank you.
Wonderful.
We have the large budget sheet, but not the
Summary.
supplementary.
Narrative.
Not all those.
Lisa has the supplementary sheets. So.
Oh, yes, we need all those. Yes.
All right.
I respectfully disagree about not having lots of handouts for people. Tis a habit.
I was just going to send some each way.
Let's do this. Grab one, pass it along. Pass that on.
Well, I didn't keep one for myself for the first one. That's fine.
No, that's okay. Grab one and pass
I have
that around.
I have one problem. No, actually, I gave it to Robbie. Yes,
Oh,
I
we
would
have them.
appreciate
We
it.
have extras.
Yeah, there are extras.
We're going two directions now.
That's okay. We can do it.
They've got those.
We are educated adults.
And then I'd like to request we make an extra pile for Commissioner White.
Sure. I printed off a lot.
She gets.
We have lots of extra copies.
Yeah. Yeah, and you got that one.
Here.
Okay. This one.
I'm just basically taking paper clips off and handing them to you.
That's okay. That's fine.
Oh, that's one yet.
See if that works. Okay.
My magnifier.
Well, the point isn't to read it. Well, on the back it is. On the back it is. Nice big graph. Yes. That's okay. We'll get into it. We'll get into it.
So what page would you like us to start?
Well, we're just going to start broad overview, meaning the budget, the overview sheet, the one that just says kind of the big increases that we're asking. We felt that starting there might be, thank you, Lisa, Vanna. We will. I think some of that's a better place to start. We can, if we really wanted to, print out our entire budget sheet and go line by line through that. That sounds awful.
I'm the only one that would think that's fine.
That we can do that. That's fine. We can get into it if we want. But I think that the biggest things I really want to highlight, even from the narrative, and that's where this is really going, and that's where a lot of these handouts come from, is for us is really keeping up with our equipment replacement plan. You all are familiar with that. That is like the lifeblood of our department. If we don't have trucks, if we don't have tractors, if we don't have equipment, we can't do our jobs. We can't maintain the roads. We can't plow the roads. We can't do construction projects. We can't do ditching. And so, we spent a lot of time with that plan, being very diligent about creating one that not only gave us reliable equipment, but also made sense financially, fiscally. Like, sure, I would love a new truck every 5 years. That's not practical. You know what I mean? And so that's where we spent all that time going over it. And so, we've talked about that a lot in the past. And so one of the other handouts, you saw the super tiny handwriting on. What I wanted that to illustrate is that is every single piece of equipment that we own. Thank you, Lisa. You don't need to read, you can if you want to, and I can, but I just wanted to show, this is the actual sheet that we use. This is every single truck, tractor, excavator, you name it, it's on there. The lifespans that we had talked about with each one are incorporated in there. So if you just look at a high level, you can kind of look and you see the trucks. We buy a truck every year. Everything's fanned out the best we can. The main point, though, to look at really is on the back sheet of that. You see a big graph. And you see it move a lot. And that's our equipment reserve fund balance. And so that is how do we afford all of this equipment over the next, this is up through 2048. Because some of these pieces of equipment have a 20-year or a 30-year lifespan, well, we need to incorporate that in here. Graders and plow trucks and excavators aren't getting any cheaper, and so if we can do our best to guess how much they're going to be even 20 years from now, you can save up $5 every year and you'll have it, instead of having to come here and panic and say, I need $500,000, And so what I really wanted to show too, and even in these next few years, and we've talked about it a lot, is you can see, you know, if you look at 2022, 3, 4, 5, and 6, we are increasing it a lot every year. Equipment is very expensive, post-COVID stuff. I mean, the cost of things are borderline unpredictable. And it's been very difficult to keep up with. But what you'll see, what we're proposing is increasing that amount about 9% every single year, just for the equipment. But then in 2027, what that allows us to do is really drop down. And so that's what we found, is saying if we can get through the next few years, we can then drop it back down to, say, 1% every year. And so that's what you see in this graph, is then the replacement of these pieces of equipment, we've kind of caught up. We've gotten into the schedule now, and we're able to build. And then you can see, you know, we get out to 2040, and it takes a big dip again. And so I just wanted at a high level, like, to me, this is like priority numero uno for my department, is maintaining this, is keeping up with this, because we start falling behind, and it's not cheap to catch up. So is there any, I guess I'll pause between each thing. Is there any questions as far as equipment is concerned?
It just makes so much sense, because there is nothing you can do unless you have equipment.
Right.
So it's the priority.
Right.
And in the last year, year and a half, we've had to really modify the prices. I talked about that a little bit at our annual report presentation, how a contracted, ordered truck, they came back and increased the price on us with a 2-year fabrication delay, $60,000.
Right.
They couldn't even honor their own price. And so we've had to basically re-engineer our numbers to accommodate that. So something that cost $260-ish thousand 5 years ago is $335,000 and change now.
Right.
So can I ask, based on what Brady gave us, where it says fund balance unreserved, so these numbers are not your reserve, you didn't give us any reserve numbers. And
I know it's tiny. That's okay.
Okay, but is this, are you saying let's see, it's 2024. Let's
Right.
look at 2023. So in your equipment reserve balance was 175,000?
Correct.
Is that?
Well,
Yes.
That's unallocated, what we're trying to keep to build. I actually have more in the reserves if you look at the annual report, because we didn't get to pay for some of these schedule items in '23. So if you, so it's in here as an expense, not as a reserve. So I still got the money sitting in our cash with notes that it is for this truck, which was not delivered on schedule. Does that make sense, Commissioner?
I think so.
So if I didn't think to grab my
You
annual
set
report, I
aside
should've.
money to pay for it when it comes.
The check
Yes.
was written.
I just
Yeah.
want to make sure I understand what this really is telling me.
So
Right.
what that is telling you at the end of '23, we have 175,000 unallocated sitting there to help offset these big expense years. And we're trying to make sure we don't ever get in a negative situation with that line right there, so that we don't have to come to you and say, we didn't, plan for all of our purchases, and now we need $500,000 now. Does that make sense?
And admittedly, it took us a little while to figure out, so the spreadsheet's nice for like myself and our maintenance department, because all that's looking at is just equipment. That's it. That's the only thing it cares about. And so these numbers sometimes are a little bit different than, maybe some of the verbiage or some of the line items we have to input into other accounting systems. And so that's where we talk a lot. And, you'll see, if you can see, there's, some of the cells are highlighted different colors, and then there's some notes in there so that when we use the spreadsheet, we know, okay, it's the year end. Let's actually, for the equipment reserve balance, what do we actually have in there? What can we roll over that isn't allocated? And that's where it's
I put that in as a hard number at
That's
the
a hard
end of the
number,
year.
and then it doesn't change, and we move on.
Oh, okay.
So it's a very
So we can't decide to spend it in a different,
No.
because you put it, okay.
Nor would I. This is equipment money. But yeah, so this is more like, for us, like I said, this is like our priority, our lifeblood is that. We saw it in other trucks that we had where they started to get beyond, how old was the Sterling? It was almost 20 years, I think. And, the axle fell off as we were trying to bring it back here to
It
sell.
was 20
It
years,
was
50, 33.
So it doesn't take much to get beyond, we're at 14 years in our trucks, and even that is like, we're there. So anyways, I just wanted to highlight that and just show, like, here's the actual sheet we use, here's the money that goes into it, here's all the equipment, here's how we're figuring this, and also it's not stagnant. We can change this stuff if we're feeling like prices are increasing a lot, or hey, actually, we're saving way too much. That's where we can adjust it and say, well, let's flatten it out for a bit, or even go down. You know what I mean? And so that's why I changed how much, in 2027, instead of increasing it, to kind of keep up for the next few years by 9% every single year, I adjusted it to say, well, I don't think we need it, so let's change it to 1, and now we're kind of catching up, we're in the system now, and we're good to go. So that, and we can try that, and then we'll just see how prices look. Obviously, looking out that far, things are going to change. But in this regard, like, we're not running super robust, but we're also not in the negative. What I'm most concerned about is in '26, what we're showing is only having about $14,000 in our reserve. That is very, very tight. But we'll just see. Every year it changes and helps inform us on what we're gonna do.
And what I can tell you is that those couple of years that you see in the graph where that number drops really low, that is because we have 2 major purchases. We're at the end of a tandem and the beginning of a grader cycle, and we have 2 of those huge purchases in 1 year.
Right.
So that's why you have those, just 2 years really, that are
Right.
significant.
Because we'd like to see a nice, but this is how it is, right? Just
Oh,
the
yeah.
Purchases line up.
Mhm.
It is.
Right.
And that is,
Double equinox.
and that is with extending our replacement timeframes with the board in 2019. The original plan that was passed in 2011, I believe it was so much more aggressive that we couldn't fund it. We were replacing pickups every 5 years, tandems, I don't remember now.
8.
And now they're,
I think it was
12.
an excavator,
12.
right?
Something like that, yeah. It's actually on the sheet on the back. I think it's got everything listed. Plow trucks are 14, so tandems are 14, graders are 12, skid and the mini-X, 15 years, pickups are 20, heavy equipment, so like excavators, dozer, whatever, would be 30 years. Yeah, it's stuff we use less, but, we can still hang on to it.
and so the earlier replacement schedule, as I said, was much more aggressive.
Right.
Tandems were at like 8 years.
Right,
Surprised the pickups are 20. That's all.
it is.
So the money you're setting aside, is that collecting interest anywhere? Are you gaining anything?
We are
Um,
not getting the interest the general revenue fund is.
It's all in the
You can't.
general fund.
Right,
We don't break it out.
You don't?
Right.
Could you do it and collect interest?
No.
Well, we get further along if we could.
Well,
No, it's
Commissioner,
already here, and it's gonna change your levy number if you do that.
Commissioner, all that would do is show then the highway department would be getting some of that interest that Brady is already earning for the county, and then our levy increase would be less than the general fund. So it's still earning interest. For example, in the spring, when we're ready to start our construction projects, we, on state aid projects, are able to draw 95% of the funds and when the contract is awarded and construction begins. I have to talk very diligently with Brady's office about how soon we're expending that, because sometimes that's $1.5 million, but we have to make the first payment in 30 days. So it's very different from things like equipment reserves that Brady is able to take and invest long-term.
Looking at every angle is what I'm doing.
that's fair.
And we are,
Appreciate it.
we have those discussions. In fact, Kelly will, when she gets a deposit, okay, how soon do you have to have some of this money? And so we have those conversations regularly.
Awesome. Not necessarily something that we are asking for an increase in, but it's just something that I've heard a lot in highway committee meetings and board meetings, whether towards us or just towards, question on the whole, is kind of consultants. Why are we paying other people to do work? Why can't we do work in-house? That type of stuff. So what I want to point you to is actually this next one. It's got all the red bar graphs on it. Kind of ends with some yellow ones. There we go, thank you. And so what I wanted to show here is why consultants. And I've talked about it a little bit in the past, but it allows us to do so much more. And especially when we have the finances to do it. A lot of times with state aid or even some grants, you can get reimbursed for consulting fees. So even if we have to shell out the initial, $30,000, we can get reimbursed for that. And what I really wanted to hammer the point home is you can look at probably the last 4-ish years or so. And so this red and yellow graph what it shows is and there's kind of a lot of information, but you can see the amount of construction we did that year, the number of projects that were done. So if you look on top of the graphs, you'll see a 1 and a 2 or a 9 or whatever. That's the number of projects that were done that year. And then you can see those little circles. If you look on the right side, the y-axis, the vertical axis, is the cost in engineering. And so the consultants that we hired. And so you can kind of sort of see a relationship between, hey, we can do a lot more if we hire some help. And the big thing with that is, we have myself, and then we have 3 engineering technicians to go and do projects. And so historically, what we've done is just handle all the inspection, all the material testing, all of that in-house, even most of the design in-house. And you can see what that does every single year, though. Sometimes no projects get done, or 1 or 2. I personally find that boring, and I personally and professionally find that boring. And so then really when I started and Lisa and I got to, really diving into the budget and where we can spend money and how we can do things, and we talked at length about the status of our infrastructure and, a quarter of our bridges are deficient and blah, blah, blah. We've already talked about all this stuff. And we really hit the ground running. And so really where we've landed is a program where we can do 4, 5, 6, 7, 9 potential projects in a year. And we have to hire out help to do that. But that's what enables us to kind of start getting ahead. Once the bridges are done, they're done. Then it's maybe 1 a year or maybe none in a year. And we can move on to other things like improving our infrastructure, not just replacing it. And improving is like, hey, let's look at our culvert system now. 1,200 culverts in this county. 100 of them we've already identified that need to be bigger. Half of those, I think roughly half, we need to call somebody to do. We can't maintain them, they're too big. And so, that allows us then to focus on that. And so really, I just wanted to highlight the consultant piece. Additionally, the other piece of paper is just the external funding awards we've received over the last few years. You can see in total, this one. So in total, over the last few years, we're running just under $15 million in external funding awards. So that's not annual allocations from the state. That's the grants that we've received through the feds, through the state, through the DNR, whoever, pick a thing. So we're averaging about $3.7 million a year in external funding, which is super awesome and allows us to do all these different projects. So I just wanted to kind of hit on that point.
And one thing I want to hit on, and I hadn't really given it a lot of thought until Robbie and I started pulling the data for this chart, was that under previous engineers, there was so much focus on those 1 or 2 projects and then being so involved with design and supervision of the techs and the field that the engineer never had the time to go after the grants. By restructuring all of that, Robbie is now securing us large amounts of grant funding to get the projects done. And we just have to fund the help differently. And so if you look on our budget at that reimbursable consultant services line, you're going to see the number is large. But again, those are almost completely reimbursable.
Right.
And we're looking at 9 projects instead of 1 or 2
Right.
Yeah.
for next year.
Good point. Thank you. Go ahead, sorry, yes. Any questions about that? Yes.
Well, I was gonna say, so for example, do we have historical grant funding? Would it be like 0 or? would
It is
be
0,
right?
pretty much.
Right. So
What-
this is like, 0 to 14 million. That's-
Yeah, if I look at this, there were several years that, do you even include bridge bonding in here? I haven't even.
The bridge bonds are in there,
The
yeah.
bridge bonds are in there. That is one thing that we leveraged.
Used.
Gosh.
Used.
Leveraged.
Used.
Too many words.
Yeah.
Leveraged a few times, but there were many years there were no bridge funding. And that, in addition to short staff issues, led us not to do anything with bridges for years. In fact, there was a 2011 bridge in my project funding database I had to keep active because I needed that funding source active to keep my assets in my database working properly, and we hadn't used it since 2011.
Right.
Because for several consecutive years, there was no bridge bonding. So that is one that we did use when it was available. The big federal allocations that we get occasionally, we get one about every 5 years. That would be the only other thing that we had as a steady since I've been here.
Beyond that, everything else that Robbie has gotten, the SPRA grants, the National Fish Passage, the Special Town Bridge, which is new because of the UT
stuff.
allocations.
Right.
So many of these, the BROS, the Protect,
Right.
those are all new. The AT, the TA.
And the reason we can do that, though, is because we have the capacity to hire consultants to help us with this. We can't do that all in-house. We do a few projects in-house. We do have a few right now on our plates that we're working on. We're designing the Gunflint resurfacing between the 92s in 2026. That's an in-house project. The trail that we're going to do along the Gunflint, that's us as well. Chicago Bay Road, that's us as well. So we do farm out a lot, but we handle what we can in-house as well, so.
And of
You can
course-
pick and choose?
Yeah,
Well,
kind of
and
nice.
we don't have bridge designers. I mean,
Right.
Robbie is the exception, but he's a manager.
Right. I don't have time for
So we do have to consult, have consultants design all of our bridges.
Correct. Okay, you have a question?
I just want to go back to this and make sure I'm
Yeah.
interpreting it.
Yes.
So, say 2022, you've got 5 projects, those are
Right.
completed projects.
Yeah, well done.
That was the cost of those 5 projects, no?
Correct.
And they are completed, sometimes they aren't officially closed out by the end of the year, so you might make a small final payment the subsequent spring when you've agreed on final quantities on
Right.
something.
Make
or done a
sure
final
the grass
inspection.
is growing.
I'm wondering, okay, where are you putting that?
So-
It's closed out, or?
We're
we said
putting it
con-
when construction occurs.
Yes. So
Okay.
like in 2022, for example, let's see if I can remember all of them. That would have been Cross River, Carlson Creek.
Sag Slump,
No, that
no,
was
it's 21. I've got my year wrong.
It's,
Fifth
that's not
Avenue was-
important, I just want to make
23.
sure if I'm repeating
No.
this information to
Oh, highway.
somebody,
Right.
saying it correctly.
Right. So yeah. So that is the year it was constructed, not the year it was closed out.
Okay,
Like the primary, and I'll say, we haven't had, like Fifth Avenue technically went 2 years because of the sodding, just because we wanted to make sure it grew back. And they had to put it back down. But I would say that's a 2023
All right.
project.
I just want to make sure I'm using the same terminology.
No, that's fair.
as you.
That's a good point.
So, okay.
Ooh, crack ceiling, striping. There's one more and I can't think of it, sorry.
So, when the engineer costs are right next to it, is that for those projects, or is that
Yes.
for these projects over here?
Nope,
Okay.
so most of the time with that would have been, the reimbursable expenses that year. So most of that's probably construction inspection, which, isn't, if you drag the lines over, you gotta make sure you look at the right axis too. We're not, so our engineering in 2022 was, $750,000, somewhere in there. That would be construction inspection, and then if there was any design on other projects, probably not related to stuff here, if it, it'd be a few years out, that would be part of it as well.
It would be part of it.
Correct.
Okay.
And I was going to actually point that out. So if you look at 23, the engineering costs are quite high.
Right.
That is because the Mill the Hill project
Mm.
was scheduled for 24, and the design scope almost doubled. It
Right.
went from about a $5 to $6 million project to now a $10.8 million project.
Right.
And the design fees on that are high, as will construction observation be.
Right.
It's a big project.
Yeah, bridges cost more. If you get into beam span bridges, you can take your culvert, a box culvert estimate, $30,000-$40,000 easily. You can double it, sometimes triple it, depending what you're getting into. But yeah. So if you talk bridges like beams, we have to call somebody for that. We don't have the expertise to do that in-house. We don't have the time, and
And you are hiring engineers for projects that maybe are 2 years out, you're getting your
Yes.
projects ready. So
Yep.
that's, I just want to make sure I'm understanding
Right.
what you're showing me here.
got it.
And to give you an idea of construction, design, and observation costs, I've tracked over the years as I've submitted when we were designing in-house, we're usually in that 16 to 18% of actual construction costs for the design and observation. And as we are consulting for those services, the external bills are coming in that same percentage range with maybe a 2% increase. So it's not much different, and we're getting so much more done. The reason there's this huge increase is, one, we are designing so many more projects, and two, you put a $10.8 million project and figure 18% of that for design and observation. That's a lot of money. And we are carrying, well, we were carrying almost $1 million in design fees on the Gunflint Trail Millville Hill project. I did ask for an advance on part of those expenses because it was so much money at the end of '23 to help our fund balance. But we're still carrying hundreds of thousands of dollars right now until we get state aid reimbursement. And that changes our cash balance, our reserve balance.
Any other comments or questions as far as kind of grants or projects or consultants for water?
Really helpful.
Cool. So the last bit, and this I think will hopefully, this was kind of another one of our bigger, or an ask, or, obviously staffing's always a conversation, and how much work do we do in-house, what are the goals? And I don't think we've had a chance to talk really like long-term goals, staffing goals at the highway department. We've been very stagnant, and actually it was interesting, Lisa and I were talking about it the other day. I believe it was 26 and a half FTEs as far as we can tell.
And I sent you a paragraph.
Right.
It changed in 2014.
Right.
And we have not changed our FTEs other than the maintenance worker one position has sometimes been in the budget as 3/4 of time or full-time. In 2018, we went to full-time for that budgeted position, and we have been at 26.5 with that going back to full-time since 2018.
Right.
I'm
So
sorry.
since 2018.
We have been at 26.5 FTE. We have made a lot of changes in position titles and how we're staffed internally.
Right.
But we have not changed our FTE. Even with the high school interns this summer, what we did is we had 2 college intern positions funded at more hours and a higher rate of pay, and we were able to morph that into the high school interns, 4 of them for a shorter time at a lower rate of pay.
Right.
And the same amount of FTE. So we're trying to be as creative as we can with what's already in the budget, as Robbie is looking towards the future to try and keep interest in that field alive
Right.
with locals.
So I guess, so now if you start looking at the org chart there, this great summary is, we haven't really changed anything in our department despite a lot of the changes we've talked about at board meetings, how we're structured, how we do things. But I think the one thing I want to touch on first, though, is just in the maintenance division, maintenance worker 2 there. You can see we have 8 currently people working as a maintenance worker 2. Something we've talked about a lot and even dubbed a fancy initiative, Cook County 2050. What does that look like? And so the reason, I'd like to increase that by 1. And if we increase our maintenance worker by 1, that also means we have to add a truck. The person needs to plow something. And the reason for that is, as I'm sure you are all aware, we have people that live all over this county, not just on county roads. If I'm remembering correctly, I believe only a quarter of our residents.
It was in that range.
Yeah, something like that. Live on county, right? Live on county roads.
Yeah.
That's right. So 3/4 of folks do not. Right. And so you think of roads like Onion River Road, you think of Irish Creek Road, think of the Honeymoon Trail, think of the Grade, think of literally any other well-traveled Forest Service or DNR road. We still get phone calls about it. Can you plow our road? Think of all our subordinate districts. Can you plow our road? We need help with this. And so we've drawn a very hard line. No, we cannot. We already know what our level of service is in this county. It already takes longer than a day. Sometimes it's 2 days to get plowed out. We know that's already an exception living up here, which I think we're all okay with. I'm very proud of that. The fact that we can do as much as we do and as spread out of the county as we are, and we can do it in a day or 2, sold. And I'm not looking to try and reduce that. Would it be nice? Sure. I don't know if we can afford it, to be honest. Maybe when I'm long retired.
That's why in the replacement schedule at the end
Is
of
me.
2048.
Yes,
right?
it just says,
Bye.
yeah. And so the thought process was, if we really want to keep having these conversations about potentially you know, plowing Onion River Road or plowing and taking over some of these other roads. I think a responsible way to do that is, as we touched on earlier with the cost of trucks and the cost of personnel, we kind of figured if we started saving, say, $20,000 a year, and then if we increase that every year, $20,000, we'll be at a mark in about 7 years to consider hiring a person and purchasing a truck. And so it gives us 7 years to sit there and say, do we want to pursue this? And, you know, we didn't last year when we went through this budget process. That was kind of the first thing that went, was that, you know. And so, you know, the sooner we can start it, so 2032 is the potential to then say, all right, where do we put this person? Where could we? I think it would be easy. It could be in either of the outlying shops. There's plenty of roads there that people would like plowed. You know, similarly, even in the main shop too, you can adjust routes and make it shorter. So that's just the thought that we had there as we get more questions about increasing service on currently, I guess we'll call them, you know, non-serviced roads right now. Is there any comments or thoughts? I'll stop with that one because that in itself is a big topic
I just
of
think it's
conversation.
such an important thing that we're looking forward in the future because we are going to grow.
Mhm.
And if we don't anticipate that and plan for that, we're in trouble. So thank you for keeping us out of trouble and trying to build for the future.
Two things.
Sure.
First of all, you were running a new storage building for
Yes.
Don't tell me no.
Well, hopefully by 2032, we'll have to double check the CIP, but.
But, and
Yes.
just for my clarification and the public's,
Mhm.
that all of them that are watching today.
Yes.
Difference between a maintenance 2 worker and a maintenance 3 worker.
Sure.
What is the difference?
Maintenance 2 is the person you see in the tandem. Maintenance 3 is the person you see in the grader. It's probably the simplest way to separate it.
And
Well,
internally, we
sorry.
call them plow drivers and heavy equipment operators,
Right.
2 and 3 respectively.
So a heavy equipment operator does not plow snow?
No, they do,
They do with a grader.
just a grader.
Okay. That's what just want to make sure.
Oh.
Yes, yes, so they're
People are
operating.
going to ask me, I want to make sure I'm using your words.
Right.
And understanding what you are saying.
Yes.
And so the grader operators will usually be grading their gravel roads, other than the city operator, plowing their gravel roads in the winter with a blade.
Mhm.
And then they will fill in for their respective plow driver in the outlying shops if that person is absent. Because they are basically the lead in the outlying shop where we have one of each.
Right.
And then there are the other pieces of heavy equipment that the heavy equipment operator will have first chance to run most of the time when they are not in their grader. Those are our backhoes and our excavators and dozers. If a truck driver or medium operator is going to run that piece of equipment as directed, they get out-of-class pay as an incentive to learn the skill so that if there is a position that opens, that's an advancement path for them possibly.
Right.
Too much information?
No, not at all.
Yes.
I really applaud the vision and the efforts here, the strategy. A further thought I have is, okay, so almost, well, you know way better than me. Doesn't seem like there's many roads that are in county standard shape that
Sure.
are not county roads.
Right.
So
Mhm.
this is a significant cost, but maybe nothing compared to that construction or upgrade cost. is.
Correct.
But we can only do one thing at a time, and we can't plan for those because
We don't know.
woods, you know,
Right.
which one's first or.
There's,
Yeah.
right.
And it could be something like the collaborative agreement that we have with the Forest Service where we plow the grade in the winter because it's the emergency detour route if something happens to 61.
Yeah.
Maybe there are other agreements that would be made potentially down the road for some of those key Forest Service or DNR roads, and that's what Robbie is trying to plan for, because the Forest Service has had some of those discussions.
Right, and we've had those, and they've gone well, actually, where even though the Forest Service or the DNR is incredibly underfunded as far as maintaining their system, you know, before, I think they're on a different forest engineer now, but I remember when I was talking with him before, if we keep talking and we have a plan in place, and if we commit to something like that and say, hey, by 2030, maybe in the next couple of years, but I think, our board's on board with saving up, for a driver and a truck, we're gonna have a very serious conversation about, I don't know, Onion River Road, okay? And say, hey, do you guys have an opportunity for grant funding or for something to fix it up? Because if you fix it up, I'll take it over. And that has translated very well, at least in conversation. To say, I think they did something similar. Trout Lake Road, for example, they did a big project on, I think last year or 2 years. Was it last year? Yeah, something like that. But if they know that we're interested in something like that and can commit to something like that, I think it makes it easier for them to secure funding and do projects to make the road in a state that we would be more comfortable taking. Because I agree, most of them, no.
Well, referring to Onion River Road, it's so well used.
Well, right.
And
I think it's the
that's-
busiest Forest Service road, if I remember right, maybe in the whole district, not just our county. If I remember right, I remember talking to them, because they actually had traffic counts on it, and it was busier than a lot of our county roads. I was like,
And when you
oh.
refer to them, you mean the Forest Service?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Taking over wouldn't be for free, I presume. There would be like some kind of agreement where they'd pay for the maintenance.
No, if they did a project on it and fixed it up and said, hey, yep, it's done, it's just your signature.
Well, this has come up multiple times in
Yeah.
our highway advisory.
Yes.
And with concerns,
Yes,
so.
absolutely. And, there's,
because
it can go a lot of different ways. It can. And
which road standard are we going to hold it to?
Right.
And then there are people who saying, don't get another road until you already have a county road.
Right.
And you say it costs $1 million
Mhm.
a mile to fix it, and they're complaining.
Right.
So, really, you're gonna take another road on without fixing my road first?
Right.
So-
It's a big conversation, and
I'm not, this is a part,
Sure.
I understand where you're coming from. I would be more resistant to
Sure.
this until we figure out what we're gonna do with what we currently have.
that's fair. Nope, totally understandable. And that's where we wanted to have this, and we wanted to talk about it and just say, these are the thoughts we are thinking and that we deal with, day to day. I will say it's starting to come up, not to persuade things one way or another already, but in applying for some grants, I'm starting to see resistance and letters of support from some agencies who own roads because they don't want them improved because it will adversely affect their road. So if I get a grant for a road, one of our roads, say, to, I don't know, turn it to pavement, for example, because it meets X, Y, and Z standards, and great, it's going to improve things. Some feedback I've received is we won't write a letter of support for that because it's going, that might be adjacent to one of their
We'll
roads.
get more use on our road. That's
Correct,
the
and we can't
problem.
afford to maintain it, and then here's why this should be a county road, which I don't deny any of that. I think on paper, it's very easy to say, sure, there's a lot of people that live on X road that pay taxes, just like you and I, that should have services. And that's great on paper. But the practical part of that, and that's the hard part with this, is that it's the practical part. We can't do it all. So herein lies this conversation.
So I would be, I'm a little surprised that, well, I mean, again, you know better, I guess, but I'm just surprised we wouldn't just like have them fix it up and then we can maintain it for a fee. Do you think that's?
For us, it's honestly, it's not for us, it's the people to do it.
Yes.
Right,
Yes.
like, we know the current level of service, and it's this, right? And now if we start putting more in the bucket, that is less, now we have to spread ourselves that much thinner without the extra help. And so that is an option that has been proposed before, is could they just, the Forest Service, for example, has proposed that. Can they pay us and we will plow, it's come up with Onion River Road, it's come up with sections of Valley Creek Road, for example, and they say that. And there I don't have people.
Right.
But
what
I
I'm
don't have
saying is
extra.
Once we get to this level,
Right.
like, it would just surprise me.
Oh, can that continue then?
Wouldn't they just pay us to maintain their fixed road?
They
Once
could.
we get there.
It could,
Instead
yeah.
of us just like taking it over for.
Right.
That's what I was like. oh.
Right, and I guess the hard part is that you're creating more, and I think that's a good point though to bring up. There's other roads that are kind of like that in the county. There's actually one right by my house that we've talked about in Highway Committee, North Pike Lake Road. So between County Road 45 and then there's this little sliver of road that goes around the east chunk of Pike Lake. That is technically Forest Service Road. And then it's connected to 43N up there. And so that tiny part of Forest Service Road, we gravel, plow, grade, fix the culverts, we basically do everything on that road.
Oh.
Right, but it's a Forest Service road.
Right.
And so, if it walks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck. But there was a lot of hesitancy in our highway committee meeting to formally say, you are now county road, blah, 43N if we extended it down or something like that. So, it's how much more of those do we want to create, I guess, of we do all the stuff on it, but it's not ours.
So they're not paying you for any of that,
No.
of course, yeah.
And
So
then there
that's
can be
part-
some overlap too, because I know like other local contractors have done work on that road as well. Technically, it's the Forest Service road. So,
And most of our work on that particular little section has been borne by necessity to get to our county road. If we
Right.
don't replace the culverts, we're not going to maintain 43N.
right, we're not gonna not plow a section of road to then plow our section. So, I think just saying, oh, I want a person to do more work is kind of underscores the giant conversation that this creates. But it is one that we've had a lot in Highway Committee, and I think it's good to keep having and try and just figure it out, figure out something. It's not the first time that we would have changed jurisdictions on roads. It's happened in the past. It's nothing new. It's just we've been pretty set now for a while. I think, like we were saying, our FTEs haven't changed in a long, long time. But our services, where we provide service, has. So, anyways. If you look on the right side of the sheet then, you can see there's another thing that's highlighted there. And so this is kind of exciting for us. This entire, I'll say, division, our environmental division now. We have engineering, we have maintenance, we can say environmental now. Has really taken off over the last couple of years. There was a question that did come up of why isn't this scope creep? Is this new stuff? Yes, it is new stuff, but by statute, if you look at your other handout that says duties of the county ag inspector under Minnesota statute 18.81, you can see all of this stuff is things we should have been doing and have not been. And so my understanding, how I interpret it, is it's not so much as scope creep as it's just new things that we've never done that we should have been doing. And so that's where this ag inspector, this environmental specialist position, if you remember a couple of years ago, that we developed in past, has really taken off. And so this summer, again, we were able to, manipulate our budget a little bit. And we brought on a seasonal help for that division, and it's been amazing. We're able to, the outreach that we've been able to do with it has helped so much. We're actually starting to get ahead as far as planning is concerned for the CCIT group, helping organize that. You probably see a lot of the outreach events that get done throughout the county. There's the one at the brewery that was awesome. I didn't see any of you there though, so next time.
We don't like beer.
Yeah.
Did we get an invite?
Yeah, well, it was on like Facebook and WTIP and Boreal. It was
You have
out
to
there.
schedule with these.
All right. I'm not going to send a Voyager Brewery invite on our Outlook. We'll figure that out. But anyways, it's been very exciting because that division, like I said, has really taken off with the invasives work, with the CCIT, with outreach. And so what I wanted to do is just kind of highlight, kind of the thoughts that we had with that position in the next few years. And so, I talked about equipment being kind of our number one, like that's my main priority. Number two would be this, in my opinion, for us, is by 2025, what we're proposing is to increase that position, the seasonal one, to make it more, it's called permanent part-time, I believe. And so it'd be like 9 months, and then like 30-ish hours a week.
And I have to tell you.
Yes.
In interest of full disclosure, I want to talk about two things quickly before Robbie finishes. The Ag Inspector Environmental Specialist position was morphed from a vacant engineering tech position as we reorganized the department, so that had no change on our staffing levels. And then we had two of those college interns in the budget at a high number of hours, because usually they were the ones help taking tickets and doing all of this, but we can't find housing for them anymore, so it's not happening.
Right.
So that's where this year's position was funded, and the young lady is working about 25 hours a week for 6 months this year, and our budget more than covers it. Since we submitted our preliminary budget, we've talked more about next year. I have it in next year's budget at basically a little shy of 30 hours a week for 9 months. We had not settled on that, and I don't have the resulting benefits with it, so it would be a slight increase in our budget. You know, I haven't run the numbers, but maybe $10,000, $12,000 over what we have in personnel now. So I want you all to know that, because
Right.
that happened after we did our preliminary budget, as we sat down and started looking at long-term.
Right, good point, good call. And so some of the stuff too, back on under the duties of the Ag Inspector sheet, what we wanted to do is really list out what is it? What are we doing? What do we need help with? What can help really make this go forward? And what are we doing more? And so you can see some of the things on there, like I mentioned, CCIT coordinator, the pesticide applicator testing. A lot of the stuff actually isn't available in a lot of places in our district. So a lot of times, and it's not just us that is doing this type of stuff, there's local contractors and local people as well that need to do that testing, and they're driving to Grand Rapids or wherever to do it, because there's nowhere to do it.
And now Tia is,
Say that, did we have local contractors?
that are pesticide applicators as well.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Right, and so you have to get certified, you need to go through, there's a specific test you have to take, and so now we offer that to
Yeah.
people. We did
Tia
not.
is proctoring those exams now.
Right,
Oh,
as opposed to
cool.
driving to Grand Rapids.
Nice.
So kind of like the CDL thing, you know, we've talked about
Yeah.
before,
Keeps
where
it local.
we have the truck, keeps it local, everybody can do it here, and it just kind of helps us more.
Awesome.
Yeah. And so a lot of it, you know, has to do with different types of outreach. The educational component has been huge, going to the schools and getting in there, because really that outreach is monumental with a lot of this. Some of the other things, you know, grant writing, I just touched on engineering grants. Similarly with here, there's a lot of grants that exist out there. The GLRI one, if you're familiar with that, Great Lakes Restoration Initiative is a big one. And so the more time, the more help we can have to get, I mean, that's just money into the county to do more. But then getting back, you know, to kind of the org chart, hopefully by 2026, what my goal is to then increase that position to full-time. And then that is, you know, 30 to 40 hours a week, 25, you know, 30, somewhere in there. So we'll see.
Is
30 to
there-
40, stick with that, sorry, be conservative.
Is there more to say with the waste and biochar program? Is there?
Yeah,
is there
we-
movement? I attend a monthly biochar meeting.
Cool.
So just learning about it.
Yeah, no, the movement right now is, I think it's a great thing we should implement. We're trying to figure out if we should make our own furnace, or if we should, you know, I don't know if they're on the market or something like that, so
Yeah.
that's new.
And the Forest Service is very interested too.
There we go. Well, and it sits on CCIT, and so that's stuff that we talk about a lot is that. So I think there's a lot of these programs here that are just untapped for us in Cook County that now we've been able to kind of lift the lid on, at least in the last couple of years, and be like, whoa, we can do a lot. You know, we just need the person to do it. And so really that's, you know, for me, like I had mentioned, was, you know, the equipment, to me, that's our lifeblood, that is day-to-day activities. We need that. I really, really, really emphasize we need to keep up with that and fund that. The next thing, at least for us, if we have to whittle down our preferences on things, to me, is that environmental technician help. Whether it's an assistant ag inspector or environmental technician, we can get in semantics, whatever. But is to make that full-time over the next 2 years. Try and spread it out a bit. I'd like to do it in one, but I understand we have limits on things, and so I think if we did it over 2, it'd be okay.
And anecdotally, there are a couple things I would like to share that I've seen with the ag inspector, environmental specialist on staff. One of the most interesting things is to see her working with our maintenance division, and in particular our mowers, and helping to educate them about the invasives. And they are collaborating when they're moving equipment and cleaning equipment. And what a difference that makes. It may sound, it's like the huge DNR push with your boats,
Yeah.
Right.
you know? We're finally doing that in the invasives world in our department. And it's really exciting to watch.
Mhm.
And then the other thing are the increasing number of table talks that Tia and her assistant are doing now, where they just set up at one of the shops in town, one of the restaurants or shops, over a lunch hour and do it a couple times a month. And they have great displays and they sit there and they talk to people
Mhm.
about invasives and what do you have on your property and what are you finding and where do you need help?
Mhm.
And those two things are really, really cool.
Mm-hmm. Outreach and education is critical.
Right.
Well, and our mowers, I mean, think
Right.
about that. I mean, mowing is a way to generate a lot of dust and seed.
Sure. Yeah, good point.
Right.
So, it's exciting.
So what's the difference in cost in the part-time and full-time? I mean, if the full-time is the ideal, it's just, I know there's been some, the labor market is, I guess, weakening, but I think that there's much more appetite for full-time.
Absolutely.
In the labor
Oh,
market, you know?
absolutely.
So like, are we gonna just struggle to find someone who's willing to work part-time, you know, like, or, I'm sorry, permanent part-time?
Right.
And then you're paying unemployment with permanent part-time as well.
So, the projected salary that I have for 1,040 hours for the seasonal environmental tech for '25 is $27,500. So you would have to double that. So you're talking about another $27,500. If we go 9 months at 30 hours a week, that's only about another 150 hours at $26.50 an hour. So that's not a huge change from what I have in the budget right now.
You have to double it and add 38% for benefits.
Well, and that's, I was just gonna go to benefits. I was gonna grab my benefits worksheet next.
Okay, so
So,
55,000 plus, something.
I can tell you approximately, and it depends on whether it's single or family insurance. I have single insurance, at about, with the employees' copay, about 21.3 for the year. I mean, family, I said it backwards. And single insurance is a little over 80, right at 8,500 for the year. So depending on whether it's single or family, you would have that expense, and then, of course, you have all the other ones that I have. So let me find a similar salary, and I can give you an idea.
That's okay, I got an idea, unless you want to, unless you want to.
Are you looking at people with certain kind of degrees in order to even be qualified?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yep, and so what's really nice is when we posted it this year, the person that we found for this role has a background in, I think it's biology and ecology. I can't remember, I think she has her master's from St. Olaf or something like that. Yeah, no, she's doing
Part-time
wonderful.
masters, is that the?
Yeah.
Yeah,
No.
seriously.
Yeah, no, they're wonderful. So yeah, it's all right, this isn't just, a kid out of high school helping spray weeds.
Yeah, no.
This is somebody that very much knows, that can probably list every weed on the noxious weed list, and is an asset to us. The training was almost in Latin. The training was almost non-existent. I think most of our training was, here's how you input your time.
Yeah. So the benefits portion for a full-time position at that wage would be anywhere from about 21.7 to 33.4, depending on the insurance package. And that would be at a full 40 hours a week. That's not the 30 to 40, that's a full 40 hours a week,
Right.
the numbers I'm giving you,
Okay, thank you.
because I went with the highest,
Yeah.
and you can scale it back from there.
So, our current seasonal environmental technician has a master's in the field and has housing,
Yes.
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 is here, working for us,
Mhm.
And yes,
and we
the,
have a need.
Yeah, she's doing very, very well. It's been very nice to see, with this, even just extra little bit of help this summer, what that division's been able to do throughout the community.
and has also become a certified pesticide applicator as well. She
Right.
already did that this summer.
Right.
She's committed.
So I have a question.
Yes.
Because I know nothing about invasive.
Sure.
Weeds, I should have done, had a beer the other night.
You could have been on our trivia team.
There were 8 teams.
Yeah.
Purple
That's
with
okay.
So
stripe.
I want to
Yeah.
know, right now, the seasonal position is 25 hours per week.
Yes.
For about 6 months.
Right.
And you ultimately want to get to 40 hours a week. What's not getting done today?
According to the ag inspector, all of the long-range planning and the grant applications.
Correct.
That is, we had a very frank discussion, and she said, that would be great, because right now I am so overwhelmed, I'm not getting my long-range planning done. In other words, planning to apply for grants for stepping up the outreach and education efforts in 2 years, and out with especially GLRI funding.
Right.
But that's
Especially
fine.
what?
G-
Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, GLRI.
What is the revenue potential there?
Those grants range so far, they seem to be increasing. We've been fortunate to get, $25,000. We applied for a $100,000 one recently and didn't get it, unfortunately. But, that's kind of what we're looking at, is that. Now, that might seem small, especially compared to what we deal with in the infrastructure world, right? But as far as invasives treatment is concerned, that is a lot of projects. That is a lot of work that can get done then. That is us being able to do that long-range planning, hire, like we talked about with consultants, hire some of these external firms then to come in and do that work. And
That's
get.
what I was gonna relate it to, is it sounds very familiar to the
Yes.
engineer not having the bandwidth to be able to go for the grant
Right.
funding, and now
Right.
you are able to. It seems like a very similar situation with ag inspector
Well,
and
Yes.
getting
and
that bandwidth.
if I can provide a little history, under the engineers in the early 2010s, we had a significant GLRI grant through the Cook County Invasives team, which had enough grant funding to actually hire a coordinator 30 hours a week that we had in county for probably 6-7 years, who ran all of this. And then that grant funding went away, and partially the person probably wanted a full-time job and left. And so we did nothing, but basically we put out a weed notice, and from when that position went away until Tia came on board. So nothing was getting done.
And I would say, to the
Lots of invasives.
right, and I'd say, to the question of what's not getting done, I would look at that whole list that we have on this sheet under the duties, because we're doing parts of some of this, but they're definitely not, the attention is too divided right now to actually do, what do I want to say? She's doing an excellent job, but to really do a good job in those positions, you need somebody to help manage them.
Well, and it's simple things like sitting there and proctoring tests is taking more and more of her time, which then
Right,
leaves other things undone, and yet it's an important service for our community.
right.
And if we're going to get the biochar program up and running, we're going to need some grant funding, we're going to need more staff time.
Mhm.
And she and her assistant are in the field treating invasives. They are actually spraying, cutting, pulling.
And putting bugs out.
And putting bugs out, that's right. And this isn't just, our purview is county roads, but this goes beyond. This
Yeah.
is also work that's happening along the trunk highway, along Forest Service roads, DNR roads. So that's where this position's a little more unique, because of the CCIT and the collaborative effort with that, is we also get Forest Service people helping us, but then we have to go there. And so then that's time away from our county system, to help them, but then they help us. And so it's, you're just starting to get spread too thin on some of this stuff.
And one of the things I can relay from when the CCIT was active, and it is now again, Tia has resurrected that whole committee of interactive agency work, there are really significant target areas, and gravel pits,
Right?
airports, and the trunk highway are 3 huge areas of concern. We actually had weevils
Yep.
up in the airport pit.
Yep.
Years ago to try and get those under control up there. And you just need a lot of staff resource to make those things happen.
Right. Yeah.
I have 2 more questions.
Sure, it's fine.
First of all, who holds this position in Lake County?
I don't know the person's name.
Is it under the highway department? Like
That's a
your
good
kids
question.
here, or
I'm
is
not
it
sure.
different?
Most of the time, the egg, so like historically, the egg inspector has been me, whoever sits in my chair. I don't know anything about plants, and I'll be the first person to admit that. And so that was a big blind spot. And so that's where this kind of started with us, was there. I put out the weed notice, and that was it. And so in Lake County, I'm not sure if it's under highway or soil and water.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. I'm just
Right.
saying, is this, I understand you guys
Right.
are loving it, but is this really the best avenue? I'm just looking.
No, that's fair, and
long term.
right, and I think that's a common, some counties do soil and water, some have it under public works or highway. I think it makes more sense under highway only because of how much right-of-way we have. And so soil and water's primary job is private, right, private property.
Lake County's is in the highway department.
It is,
And-
okay.
And also, Commissioner, state statute says that the ag inspector will be the county engineer or his or her designate as approved by the board. So the state statute has placed it in the highway department for that component of it, at least.
Right.
The ag inspector component.
Looks like Jason DePiazza.
Well, he's the
Yeah,
engineer.
He's the engineer.
Yeah, Jason's the engineer. It might be another Jason, actually, that's the egg inspector, but I can't remember.
Madam Chair, could I make a request? So I do want to get to the general fund yet this
Yeah.
afternoon. And I also want to make sure, when objective of this meeting is to make sure that if there's any homework that we need to do prior to Tuesday, that we have the opportunity to identify those follow-up items. So I'd like to ask if any of the commissioners have any requests of the highway department for information that we can bring back on Tuesday.
And while they think, may I ask you a question? We are scheduled to do an actual budget presentation to the board on July 23rd. That still stands.
It's still on the agenda. I mean, it could well be that all those questions are answered and the commissioners have all the information for that. But the request was, they wanted extra time this year to have kind of less formal conversations about the budget and be able to process the information before we get to setting the preliminary budget.
Because I do have a
Got it.
PowerPoint, if anybody is going to want that in a couple of weeks, just as kind of a, here's division by division, here's all of the changes outlined, here are all of the projects. I have that already if the board wants that in a couple of weeks as just a follow-up to this.
I think the presentation on the 23rd is likely to be a lot more abbreviated. because
Yeah.
I've done
Yeah, and like I said, I have a
Got
presentation
it.
ready, and if there were other things that you wanted, I could certainly delve into those.
Appreciate that.
Was there any other questions?
Well, if there's not anything right now, please make sure you reach out to Robbie
Yes.
and let him know, so that he and Lisa can get the answers that we need before we meet.
Well, I
Commissioner
did have
Johnson?
one more question.
Sure.
Of course.
Because I know nothing about this stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure what a seasonal or an environmental technician does when there's 6 feet of snow on the ground. Besides, like grandpa,
Right.
we have 2 people there, so I would like that information.
Sure.
I would like to see what you're going to do month by month.
That's fair. I guess at a super high level, or can I?
It's okay with me, but they were saying cut this off.
No, it's okay. It's quick. It'll go fast.
I'm not wanting to cut off discussion, but I am wanting to get
Right.
to our agenda. And I also want to make sure, again, that if there's additional information we can bring back, that we.
Right. Nope, and that's a great question, and we had that one a lot when we were coming up with that. And what we've landed on is the amount of planning that's required. So right, this season, it's field work. They're out in the field, they're doing stuff, like we had talked about, cutting weeds, spraying weeds, pulling weeds. And then in the winter, really, it's that planning component. It's working with our project partners. What are your goals for the next year, the next 2 years, 3, 5, whatever. And then also trying to find grants. And then writing them. And I will say grant writing, I know it's easy to summarize it in 2 or 3 bullet points, but as somebody who does write and go through a lot of grants, it is incredibly time consuming, and especially with some of these and the information you have to gather. So I don't want to undermine what, kind of me trying to explain it is, but the work that has to get done in the winter is crucial That season for us, it's no different in my head than kind of what our techs do in the winter. We design. And that's one bullet point, but that is an immense amount of work that goes into that. So
And
it's
it-
very similar on the environmental side.
And I would add event planning. I mean,
The event
an
planning,
event
right.
like the Voyager Brewing one takes months of working with the establishment, with all the vendors,
Right.
to make sure that every product is available, the theme is consistent. And they want to do more of those kinds of events, but there are time constraints.
Right.
So
That's
I
a good
think
point.
that would be, it's not just against the public.
Right.
Of course.
Right.
So I think, you tried this for 6 months here, or
Mhm.
whatever, I guess it hasn't been 6 months yet.
Right.
A report to the board, hey, this is what we got accomplished, this is.
Sure.
And this is what is still needed to be done, would be helpful for everybody to.
Perfect. That's super
That
easy.
doesn't go to the Voyager brewer.
Yeah.
You know what you're talking about.
Well, and the table talks, and the CCIT meetings. I just used that one because we had talked about it earlier.
Right.
There are so many other events. She does events at school, they, not she, it's they
Right.
now. They do events at the schools, and by adding, that additional resource person, they can do more of those events.
Right.
And Tia gave us a presentation, and I thought it was really helpful just to get that picture, and it'd be really good, I think. to have
Maybe
like a
Tia and Abby can both come
Inventory, or
and
just
talk
like,
about.
here's our county, here's the map of the mass, and, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think your point makes sense too, because what we're proposing is adding staff and adding permanent staff. And so what are we permanently going to do now forever and ever, is that. So yeah, I think we can put that together. We wouldn't propose it if obviously we hadn't talked about it a lot. I don't like to bring fluffy things. I bring things that I think, make sense for us in the short and the long term. And so what we'll do is gladly do that. By Tuesday, end of the month? I got a couple weeks, right?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
We aren't gonna vote until the end.
Until September.
Right, okay.
Preliminary.
No, that's fine. Yeah, we can, happy to do that. That's
All right.
cool.
Great.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So we have about an hour. Let's take a 5-minute break and then come back. And at that point, we'll look at action items for next week for our budget work session.
So, next thing on the agenda, wanted to talk a little bit about the general fund. At our June 25th meeting, you all received a copy of the spreadsheet or the list of new requests that appear on the screen here. And so, again, this is not an all-inclusive list. There are a few things that may be in the general fund that are not here. These are just some things that I was able to pull out as we were starting to plan this. And so, again, it does not include COLA. It does not include health insurance premiums. We are budgeting for those things. But this list is basically just some of the bigger things, including the new proposed HR generalist position for implementing the strategic plan, and also just enabling us not to burn our HR staff out. New maintenance position, we have not added any new resources to maintenance in a long time. I don't know that we have historic data about when the last time was that we created a new maintenance position, but I do know that Brian has been wanting and needing somebody for a long time, but that's never actually made it into the budget. The community center assistant, adding another day to that person's schedule, that's part of it. The board already agreed that it would support ARC's proposal to add another day to the probation administrative assistant position to make that full-time, to make recruitment easier. We talked at the committee of the whole last month about the extension contract price increase. Then the next few items, so there's a bunch of stuff in the strategic plan related to training for staff, including department heads, and then also commissioners. I think this is one of the largest new expenses that would be in the budget if the board agrees to include it. I think the amount that we would budget for any of these is certainly up for discussion. I put this in here as kind of a starting point for a conversation about what those expenses might look like. Line 13, Security System Replacement Fund. This is just to start budgeting for the replacement of the Verkada system that actually was just installed. The installation was completed last week. This is to plan for the replacement of that system. Required BCA software upgrade. This is something that we just got an email from Rowan, I believe yesterday, and that cost is actually going to be a little bit higher than we originally expected, probably more like $28,000. And then you've already heard about the Highway Department proposed cost increases, so I don't need to touch on those again. In terms of where we are with the implementation of ClearGov, we were hoping that today we would be able to actually work in ClearGov and do some scenarios in that program. We just got the IFS outputs to ClearGov earlier this week, and so we don't actually have the current proposed budget available to show you in ClearGov. I'm hoping that within the coming days that will be available. And Brady, I don't know if you got any additional feedback from Frank on when that might. I mean, I don't think the turnaround's going to be that long.
No, I don't think so. It's just a matter of who's available.
Right.
And is
So-
there training that will be available for us so that we can efficiently use that system to help us examine the budget and?
I will get back to you on that because it's a work in progress, and
Yeah.
I'm not sure exactly how that is going to play out.
Okay.
What I do know is that in the interest of getting this conversation going and giving you information about the general fund proposals, I put together a spreadsheet like the one that you've seen the last few years that has everything by department. And that is this. And what I'm going to do is send you the spreadsheet so that you have time to look at it on your own. And what I did, and I think I should get a pay raise because I was able to figure out conditional formatting in Excel, which is
It's
not.
not in your job description.
It's not the most straightforward thing to do, but what I wanted to do is in column U, which reflects the percentage change between last year and this year, I wanted to have some visual cue to identify places where costs have gone up. And so green is any increases that are below 5%. Items that are color-coded yellow are increases between 5 and 10%. And then anything that's in red is more than 10%. So again, some of these things, and I don't have all the, Brady and I have been kind of scrambling to get this together. So you may have questions about what some of these increases are that I wouldn't be able to answer today. But just looking, for example, at the Commissioners Fund, that's Fund number 1, you can see that we plugged in the estimated training cost for you all, which previously was $500, and now the proposed amount is $15,000. Now again, and there's a reason that we haven't really shared this information until now, because this is really a working document. And I know that when you put information out into the world, people tend to look at it and think, okay, this is what's happening. And I just want to stress, this is a working document, and part of the reason that we put this together is so that you could look at it and provide feedback on what the actual numbers should be. So I can scroll through this. Again, I will send it to you, but you can see, again, training for the commissioner's budget accounts for pretty much all of the increase in that category. Under auditor treasurer, we have, and actually for revenues, so all the items or all the columns in red are actually revenues, not expenditures. And so the color coding is actually reversed. So in this case, red is a good thing because it reflects a significant increase in revenues. But you can see that, here are some of the items that are going up. Mileage is going up about 17%, and the same for supplies. And so just going down the column, you can see there are some places where costs are going up pretty significantly. In the assessor's office, deferred comp match is going up. And Brady, do you recall in talking with Bob about that, why that number is proposed to be so much higher? Is it just because we have more people in that department using
Yeah.
deferred comp?
I mean, they can't
Yeah.
go beyond the threshold.
Right,
So
it's
people-
3%. So, I mean, that's just increased enrollment in that program, which actually I think is a really
Yeah, I
good
hope
thing.
all employees do that.
They should be. I mean, it's if they're not, they're leaving money on the table.
Mr. Johnson.
I have a thought, because,
Yeah,
so when we're looking at the line item, professional/contract services,
Mhm.
this came up in our budget committee
Right.
meeting a few weeks ago.
Mhm.
Can, for each of these departments that have an amount there
Mhm.
and they're budgeting, can they also get us a list of what they are including in that budget?
they can. And in fact, I mean, we still ask departments to fill out the budget summary sheet that kind of provides that additional detail. Brady and I, after we had that conversation, we were trying to figure out, okay, how can we best respond to that request? Because contractual professional services are really varied. And it really, trying to pull that information out can be really challenging in terms of like figuring out the historical information. We can easily do it for next year's budget because that detail is available. But in terms of how those costs are represented in past budgets and what we spent on contractual expenses, like Brady was saying, it could be like a one-time contract where we pay somebody $500 to do X. And then
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
That's why I think when you look at assessor there, well, you only spent 2,200 last year, and now you want to spend 21,000.
Mhm.
Okay, that's going to be what do you want that for?
Right.
What have you used it for? What do you want to use it for?
Right.
Those would be the types of questions.
And those are the kinds of things that we can come back on Tuesday and provide that kind of detail.
So I'm wondering on the health insurance, I've been reading that it's going up 10, 12, 14%. That's in the general public. Do you think 9.3 is reasonable?
Well, I mean, in the last several years, we've used 10% as a placeholder. I've not heard anything from the service co-op to suggest that we should be budgeting more for that. And it isn't something that we'll know until the end of next month.
Next month, okay.
Yeah. But it's been our practice to budget 10%.
It's a combination of what's going on in the market and our own experience.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm not aware of, you don't know, because
Yeah.
people's families,
Yeah.
other members, not people working here, so there may be, but sometimes you're aware, generally aware that there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
I'm just not aware.
It's a general public, that have their own private insurances. We're in a co-op, so we're different. But I think we could expect at least the 10 maybe.
Right.
I would-
And I mean, it really depends a lot too on what's happening within your own pool, right? Because if you have, let's say you have a couple of subscribers who have major medical issues, that can have a significant and disproportionate effect
Sure.
on what premiums would be in future years. So, or it can work the other way too. If people aren't using a lot of medical care, then that can drive it down. So yes, for Tuesday, Commissioner, we'll get more detail on that. Again, we did ask departments to put together those summary sheets. I don't have those available today. So again, just going through this, we just wanted to see at a high level kind of like where some of the larger increases are. For example, in MIS, the data processing software, that reflects increases in the BCA software that we're going to have to get. And some of them are just, trends over time suggesting the need to increase expenditures or budgeted line items.
So other services and charges, 303.2%. That would be an example.
Right.
So
And-
elections,
You're going by last year's approved.
that's
numbers,
because it's an
budget.
election year,
Right,
right?
and some of these, I
25.
mean, last year was not an election year.
Right. It's because
Yeah.
it's an election year.
But, and I really do appreciate you're going to send this to me because
Mhm.
I have to do this all on my own.
Yeah.
Because I
Yeah.
have to see, 12 years of that. And I find the most interesting thing to compare to is the actual numbers. Because, and I've made the claim before that some budgets sometimes seem to be padded to me. Because when you historically look at what was actually spent,
Mhm.
there's a big difference. I just
Mhm.
pointed out the $2,200 to the $21,000. Okay, could be a very legitimate reason for that increase, but those are the kinds of
Could be.
things.
There is a legitimate
There is.
reason. We don't know what it is right now.
Mhm.
Right.
So there could be a good answer. You're right. I will
There is a
agree.
good answer. We
Well,
just don't know it.
and if I don't know it, I'm not gonna say it is. Okay. But that's where I find it important to also look at the historical record of what was actually spent and
Mhm.
not just last year's budget numbers. So I thank you that you've
Yep.
included 23,
Mhm.
and I will compare them back to
Yep.
earlier years.
So again, I mean, I wasn't prepared today to go through and explain like what each of these increases is. But what I would like you guys to do is to look through this. I'll send this to you this evening yet. And then we will start putting together the information regarding contractual expenses, so you've got a list of those. And then
I'm sorry, can we sort by calling you?
we can't because they're not continuous.
Okay.
I mean, we can
That's fine,
sort.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I mean, what are you wanting to pull out of that exactly?
I'll play with it when I have it.
Okay.
Thank you.
I mean, so this is the process sheet. This is the raw export from IFS. And so it's got everything. And so here you could do some sorting because it's just a long list of all the expenses. And I've also like hidden columns that are not really, that don't really explain anything.
Unlike E and G,
Right.
right?
So I mean, but this is part of the same workbook.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you will be able to see the raw data. Again, this is proposed, it's spaghetti against the wall, it's everything, and this is the starting point for this conversation about what are the board's priorities, what would you support funding, what do you have questions about, how can we go about prioritizing. Commissioner Sullivan, thank you for sending the matrix that you did. I haven't had a chance to work with that.
And really, that's, you know, when you're looking at a force matrix, you're not looking at a laundry list of things.
Right.
You're looking at some big picture things to prioritize.
Right. And, you know, that would be good for like looking at some of those proposed new expenditures,
Yeah,
because that is a smaller subset of
right.
everything. So I will, I'll send you this workbook, and then both of you, all of you can have fun playing with it.
I wouldn't say fun, but we'll play with it.
No, spreadsheets,
You love it.
spreadsheets are fun. As long as you don't have to do conditional formatting. But when you figure it out, I mean, I just like having a very simplified visual way of sorting information and looking for where the really notable changes from
Yeah.
last year. So,
Having things highlighted at different levels of increase is very valuable.
Yeah.
It makes it a lot easier, so thank you for that.
yeah.
We probably need to be flexible too for the different departments. They may not be able to get it all together for next Tuesday, or are you asking that they do?
Well, no, so we already sent them the summary, the overview sheets. And so now I can tell you from past years, some departments are better than others at
Sure.
actually getting those submitted timely. So there may be some that we still don't
Well,
have.
you tell them if they don't have it by Tuesday, they get a 10% budget cut.
Okay.
Well, okay, is that, do you want to vote on it? You can't vote on that.
We can't vote, this is a work session. This is a work session.
Doesn't make any sense.
It's a work in progress.
It's a work in progress, and what this does is give us an opportunity to think of questions in advance, send them to department heads, and have some really thoughtful discussions. So I think this is really helpful.
So what I'd like to ask too, and I realize we only have like a few working days between today and Tuesday, but to the extent that you have an opportunity to identify other questions that you'd like us to be able to answer on Tuesday, please email those to me over the weekend or whenever, so that we can at least have Monday to kind of put stuff together.
Okay,
Yeah.
we will do that. Thank you.
So, yeah, and then I was kind of hoping just to have a conversation, a very brief conversation. It has been the board's practice over the last few years to try to target a levy that is, basically, I think in the 4 to 5% range. And that's based on that historical average that we got from the data that Brady shared. And that has been, over time, that has been the general trend. And of course, if you think back to that spreadsheet, you can see that in the years where there were 0% or very small levies, we started digging a hole then later required that we have double-digit increases. And I don't think anybody at this table wants to see that happen again. And so my expectation, and correct me if I'm wrong, but is that the board still wants to shoot for some modest levy increase that keeps us on a path to kind of absorb the cost of inflation and keep things on an even keel so that we're not looking at having to impose higher increases in future years. Having said that, I recognize too that we also, I mean, Brady shared the revenue numbers, and there's some really bright spots there, so that could give us an opportunity to offset some increases this year. But, I mean, we'll have to have more conversation about that.
Well, my theory is set the levy a little bit higher because we can come down.
We can't go up.
You can't go up. So, you know, I started off with 10, and we went down to 9, down to 7, as things kind of, you know, were presented to us. So, that's my theory. Start a little bit high, don't scare the people, but just say reality is.
Kind of our worst case.
I caught you cough.
My allergies have been horrible.
I know, mine too.
Sorry about that.
Anyway, that's what.
I'm going to advocate for a 4 to 5%, no more.
Mhm.
I think we haven't even talked
No.
about bonding and buildings and CIP plan. That's not even here. But that's going to be huge.
Mhm.
Now, maybe we can use some of that fund balance. I was trying to figure
Yeah.
calculations, or maybe that will help offset. But when you think about that, you think about the EDA and the HRA levy, which is a huge jump. I think they're doing good work. I'm excited to see what's going to happen. So, but that isn't a factor on somebody's taxes. Then you look at the school having a referendum for their projects. And then you think about the hospital. I know they're having some financial difficulties. I don't know, I haven't heard what they're doing there. But we have to remember, it's not just what happens for us in this building or on our campus. It's the taxpayers whose insurance has gone up, food's gone up, and I can't afford to buy a house. So when we think, yeah, all these things are great and wonderful ideas, I agree. But then there's, what are we asking the taxpayers to actually pay for? And is there something that maybe we can come up with a plan that's a good idea, but not this year?
Yeah.
So.
Well, that is exactly your job.
Yep.
It's my job to say, here
Here it is.
are the possibilities, here are some needs that we've identified. Ultimately, the decision to fund or not fund these items is up to the board.
So I'm gonna be on the lower end of that levy increase. I am not, or preliminary, I don't think we should start at 10 or 12% and work our way down. Because that's unrealistic that could even happen. Let's be realistic about what we can afford.
I think after we decide what's realistic, then we can say, okay, we're gonna have to eliminate this, that, and we'll start at 5. But I think, you know, to decide which department, decide who gets an extra person on staff, and who does this with bonding, who does this, you know, for community assets that we have to take care of too. You have to weigh all that out.
Right. Well, this is a great starting point. We have a lot more information than we had a year ago at this time. So I'm excited about it and looking forward to ClearGov and our public being able to have all kinds of information about our budgets. So.
And I want to express my appreciation for making sure that this was a discussion, that it didn't feel confrontational about asking questions, and we get the information, and it was an opportunity to discuss things, not make a decision. So,
Were you
thank
expecting?
you for doing that.
Were you expecting a confrontation? I wasn't.
You know, sometimes, you know, the engineer and I get into it about what we really should be doing, so you never know.
Commissioner Mills.
Thank you, Chair Sullivan. My knee jerk is when we're looking at these requests for additional resources is going to be on the future maintenance worker too, and then the staff training. Like, I feel strongly about the staff training. It just can't all happen in 1 year.
Yeah.
And so if we can phase that strategically,
Mhm.
I think that would do a whole lot of good, and potentially with the department heads too. I don't know. That's kind of where I see the easiest pickings for cuts with the additional requests.
Mhm.
I'll certainly go through things a lot more carefully in general, but you know, I kind of assume there's not going to be cuts from what our budget was, you know, last year. It's just more of these additional requests where I would try to pare
Mhm.
things down.
Mhm.
So that's my knee jerk, and whatever number, the percentage is somewhat arbitrary. Just like Commissioner Johnson said, it affects all of us as well as the state taxes and the federal taxes. It's all part of that picture. And, so we have to be sensitive to what the everything is costing, but I think we also need to make sure that we're providing the services that the community deserves, and so finding that balance is going to be the trick.
Mhm.
But the picture that was presented from yourself, James, and Brady, I think is very promising, and looking forward to diving in a little deeper here.
Any other questions or comments?
I just want to say I appreciate the feedback, because we need that from you. You are the policymakers, and we can bring forward recommendations, but ultimately, you are the deciders. So the sooner we start this conversation, I think the better off we'll be by November or September.
All that being said, the seasonal environmental worker, I'm kind of skeptical on that seasonal permanent part-time scenario. Like, I think it's kind of like, okay, are we going to do this, or are we not going to do it? And an opportunity we have right now, living in Cook County, working for us. It's just like, okay, well,
That's in the mix.
talking gift horses here, or this one.
I have an opinion about that, but I'll wait till later to tell you.
All right.
We'll get a lot more info too on just what that means.
Absolutely.
Monthly to-dos.
All right, well, I think it is a little after 4:30, so we will adjourn at this time and take up this topic next week.
All right?
Thank you
Thanks,
so
folks.
much.
Brady.